Hello and welcome back to Big Data Week in Chicago. My name is Sebastian James and I'm the city leader here for Big Data Week in Chicago. And standing next to me is Eugene Granovsky. Eugene Granovsky is going to tell you about a practical look at self-tracking. You just saw Roscoe Nicholson talk about self-tracking and its impact on wellness and wellness behaviors. Now we're going to take more of a practical look. What works, what doesn't work, what's really good, what's a good value, and so forth. But before we begin, I'm going to ask you again, please follow us on Twitter. Please retweet the hashtag BDW14CHI, and please, please, please join the Conf4Eyes community. It's at a link just below the screen you're looking on. And now we're going to get going with Eugene.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Today we're going to talk about a practical look at self-tracking or quantified self. And now there we go. So we're going to split this up into three little sections. First, about me. Second, a little QS 101 primer. And then the issues that we're seeing. So why am I here? My claim to fame is I run a website called Ask Me Every. It's self-tracking through text messaging. And I also run the Quantified Self Meetup community here in Chicago. We have about almost 4,000 users on Ask Me Every and 450 members in QS Chicago. So I am always interacting with people who are tracking. The natural question that I get after explaining that is, what do I track? This is just my Lyft information. So every day I log this on my Lyft app. And then I also have a bunch of things that I track passively, actively, rarely, monthly, and then a retired category. Things like the Fitbit and the MyBasis that I wore for a long time and then learned what I could and moved on. So what is quantified self? The official definition is self-knowledge through self-tracking or self-knowledge through numbers. The key word for me that I tell people all the time is the self-knowledge part. If people knew everything they possibly could about themselves without any data, without any numbers, they would. That's what our friends are for. That's what our feedback in organizations are for. But in today's world, there is a lot of misinformation. And if you think about how honest you are with yourself, quite often there's a dissonance between reality and what you think of yourself. So the self-knowledge part is the key. The data is the guide. The general process that everyone follows when they track for themselves is they collect the personal data, they try to make some sort of sense of it, and then they try to find meaning from it. And we'll see how that applies when people track. So the meetup community and where the quantified self term came from really originated in 2008. It started in San Francisco from the same people who started Wired Magazine, Kevin Kelly and Gary Wolf, and they still run it today. If you think about self-tracking, it's been going on for a long time. I'm sure everyone's grandmother had an analog scale in the bathroom that you could step on. And Ben Franklin actually tracked 13 virtues that he considered important to his well-being. And that was hundreds of years ago. The difference now is that there are tools available that are cheaper and accessible to anybody. And the main one that came out that changed in 2008 was the accelerometer. This is what is in your iPhone. The chips cost about $1. Same thing in your Fitbit, the Jawbone Up. There are more advanced versions of this now, but it measures movement. And if you can extrapolate that movement, you can actually track things like steps and whether your phone is by your ear or not. So in San Francisco, this meetup started, as I said, in 2008. Now there are 164 groups, 30,000 members worldwide, 118 cities among almost 40 countries. Chicago is one of the main ones in the United States now with 450 members. And the group of people that show up to our meetups are quite unique. Generally speaking, they're split between two groups. Those that have already been tracking for a long time, didn't realize that there was a community behind people who analyze their own data, and then just dive right in. And then we have the people who hear about all these people tracking and want to learn more. They want to understand where these people come from and what they do. Generally speaking, from talking to other meetup organizers, this meetup community grows about 50 or doubles every year, and we've seen that here in Chicago as well. Also in Chicago, I want to introduce you to a IIT ID researcher by the name of Kim Irwin. She's been integral in our meetup. She's presented, her students have presented, and she came out with, her research has produced 4 different quantified self archetypes that I think is really important for people to understand when they start tracking. And they are target-focused, performance seekers, experimenters, and life missioners. And I'll go through them in a second. So if you think about what people track, everyone has their own motivations. So the target-focused group would generally ask questions like, do I look good? They are focused on the end result. The performance seekers want to know how fast they can run. So they are focused on getting their mile time to the absolute lowest possible. The experimenters are the ones who toggle with how they practice. So what happens if I run outside? What happens if I run inside? And then there are the life missioners, those that track just to know that they're doing the right thing. For example, did I go to the gym? I personally have been in all of these, and it kind of changes depending on what you're tracking. But generally speaking, I think I consider myself a life missioner. Did I go to the gym is a question that I track myself. So among the app and among running quantified self, there are a handful of issues that I believe have come up for tracking. And Roscoe actually hit on a number of them earlier from a research standpoint, but I'll talk to them about an individual basis. The first and foremost one that for me is important is called the Hawthorne effect, also known as the observer bias. It's named after a plant that changed its lighting and told its employees that it's going to change its lighting in order to increase their employees' productivity. What they were amazed to find was that they increased the lights, higher electricity bill, and their workers were more productive. But a funny thing happened. Then they turned the lights off, and they told the employees they were going to turn the lights off, and productivity increased again. So they couldn't figure out what was going on. And what researchers learned is that just by telling people that you will be observed increases their awareness of the action they're doing. And this now happens on an individual basis among all quantified self devices. In other words, just by wearing a Fitbit or a Jawbone Up or a MyBasis watch, you will be much more conscious of the amount of steps you take, what your heart rate is like. So in addition to the data that you're getting, you're also going to be behaving differently, because even if it's just yourself observing or knowing that you will observe yourself, it is an accountability tool. And it's a very powerful one too. Another one, and Roscoe did talk to this, is the accuracy and precision of devices today. Or said in other words, what is a step? I mentioned earlier that the new devices use accelerometers. And generally speaking, what they do is they measure the pause in the step to measure each step. But if you ever watch people walking down the street, you'll notice that everyone walks differently. Some people have a very brisk pace. Some people walk leisurely. Not to mention the differences when you're actually running versus strolling around. So to be perfectly honest, these devices today are extremely precise. If you run the same route, it'll spit back the same exact amount of steps and distance traveled. But if you are comparing yourself with others, as a lot of these programs generally do right now, there's going to be a dissonance. I've even tested this on my own devices with people where I give one device to me, do the same same routine, and then give it to my co-founder, Mark. He does the same thing and gets wildly different results. So the key takeaway here isn't as bad as it sounds. The point is that accuracy isn't really all that important. I don't think it generally matters whether a person is walking 10,000 steps or 11,000 steps. The general thing you want to know is whether you're walking 11,000 or 1,000. And these devices do that just fine. The problem becomes when people start comparing data, and especially when people get scientific about their data, which is really hard to do when you're on a beach one day and then walking to work on another. Another thing that I think everyone realizes in this world is the lack of actionable feedback. Right now, a lot of these devices are siloed. I track my activity with one device, I track my sleep with another, I track my genetics with another. And in an ideal world, I want to know what I can do to improve my life. And there's only a limited time that I can spend on this. I have to have a job and all of that as well too, right? So right now, these devices are extremely siloed, and the information is extremely siloed. So we need, well, eventually, I believe that we will have this all grouped together. But for now, this is all individual pathways. And because of that, it's really hard to figure out what one little thing I can do to improve my life tomorrow. It still takes a lot of time to sift through your own data, let alone any automation. Now that we are talking about data, and this is going to be brought up over and over and over again, is data privacy. Over and over again here in Big Data Week. So data privacy is a huge issue for people who care about it. Some people absolutely don't. There's one entrepreneur I know that actually completely believes that privacy is a thing of the past and manufactured by archaic times and not the future. However, this is a snapshot of Ask Me Every tracking data. You will see that I can go in and see what people are tracking as the owner of this app. Now, we put in a lot of safeguards so that we don't match questions to people, so we don't do that. But a lot of companies do. Facebook is the really famous example where they've had engineers stalk crushes. And when it comes to quantified self-data that is very personal, you can see that it can be a little bit touchy. And that also leads to data ownership. The quantified self companies today make no secret that they share their data. If you read their terms of service, I don't know how well you can see this on the screen, but my favorite is WellnessFX. They just say, we share your information with third parties. This is no secret. They will give it. A lot of them distinguish it from the user so that they can only say, hey, 1,000 people age 29 track this or have these results. But this information does go elsewhere. Again, it's up to the end user to really determine whether they're comfortable or not. I've gone back and forth personally. I personally think that this is going to end up in regulation hell in Washington, D.C. in a few years, but that's my opinion. And then finally, I want to speak to the tracking individual crowd of unintended consequences. A lot of times when we start tracking one individual thing, we tend to think of it as an individual thing, but just like changing the tires on your car, those tires are connected to something. And so I'm just going to tell you a quick story about myself. I am a chronic late sleeper. I wake up at 9 pretty much every day, which is really difficult to get to work on time and all of that. And I've routinely tried to step it back. And one such time I was really determined, and I set my alarm for 8:30, then 8, and then on Wednesday 7:30. And honestly, by the third night, I couldn't fall asleep to the point that I didn't sleep all night, and you can only imagine what that did to my productivity that week. So I just want to encourage people to not think of each little data point as an individual metric and really focus on the broad picture at hand. And then I feel like I've been very negative in all of this with these issues. So I'm going to show you one positive thing and talk about myself one more time. So this is a snapshot of my heart rate data. I used to wear a device called MyBasis, and it passively tracks your heart rate. Again, its accuracy has been wildly disputed, but its precision did just fine for me. If you look on the left-hand side, this is generally the night, and this is generally the day, and this is a heart rate graph. So you can see on the right, I'm active, my heart's beating pretty hard. And then on the left, it's generally very light. So this is when I'm resting, except for 2 black-red bars, here and here. And I looked at this, I was just curious, and I could see that something's going on. And I noticed that these were Sundays. So I looked at my Saturdays. What did I do? I actually played basketball the day before. So this makes no sense. I went to the gym. I played basketball. Why would I be why would my heart be as active at night as it is, or more active at night than it is during the day? Well, what ended up happening was after basketball, I would go have a beer with my teammates and relax. I thought I had already exercised for the day. What I was doing was dehydrating myself even further. And you can see, pretty clearly that, my heart was not relaxed at all. And probably I would have been better off not playing basketball at all. So these are the type of things that people are learning. Unfortunately, you need the type of context and the time to look through this because otherwise, if I just handed this graph to somebody, they wouldn't be able to make sense of it in general. So that's me. Again, my name is Eugene Granovsky. You can contact me at euggra@gmail or check out some of my work at experimentable.com with my co-founder, Mark Moschel, who's actually at Quantified Self Europe this week, so he wasn't able to attend. So, Sebastian, I want to thank you for having us here. It was a great opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. All right. And that was Eugene Granovsky talking about practical thoughts about self-tracking. So I'm going to usher you off here.
Thank you.
And talk with my audience a little bit before we move on to our next person in a few minutes. Now, once again, thank you for being a part of Big Data Week in Chicago. Once again, I want to thank our main sponsor, Blue 1647, Cook County, for all the help that they've given us. Today's presenters, Eugene, Roscoe, Andy Schwarm, and everyone who's been a part of the Big Data Week in Chicago community. Coming up next is Ken Gleason. Ken is going to talk about business models in the data economy. It's going to be very fascinating, and what's going to be cool is we're going to bring Ken in. We're going to beam Ken's broadcast in from New York straight to you. Ken is from here. His partner's from here. That's the Cook County Chicago connection. But we will be back in a little bit with Ken Gleason's presentation on data business models in a data economy, if I can say that right. We'll be back.